Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda.
Hare Krishna. Welcome. We are continuing with our Bhagavad-gita. Our channel is Bhagavad-gita, here it is. Our book is Bhagavad-gita as it is. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And my name is Labanga Latika. We are in the 6th chapter, Dhyana Yoga, which is not the same process as Bhakti Yoga, the path we are following. But it is very parallel, and it is part of the whole, Vedic knowledge. So Krishna gives Arjuna everything, so he can make very informed, good choices. So the principles are the same, but Dhyana Yoga is a little tougher to perform. I'm reading text 25. Shanai Shanai Ruparamed Buddhya Dhritti Grihitaya Atma Sangstahang Mana Kritva Na Kinchit Apichintayet. Gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence sustained by full conviction, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. Purport. By proper conviction and intelligence, one should gradually cease sense activities. This is called pratyahara. The mind being controlled by conviction, meditation, and cessation from the senses should be situated in trance or samadhi. At that time, there is no longer any danger of becoming engaged in the material conception of life. In other words, although one is involved with matter as long as the material body exists, one should not think about sense gratification. One should think of no pleasure aside from the pleasure of the Supreme Self. This state is easily attained by directly practicing Krishna consciousness. So yes, the further you come on the path of Jnana Yoga, the yoga of meditation, the closer it looks to Bhakti. Because Bhakti, it's all about that, bringing the consciousness back to Krishna in loving service. And the same thing, sustained intelligence. One should become situated in trance by means of intelligence sustained by full conviction, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone, think of nothing else. So in Krishna consciousness, this is not attained in a mechanical way. This is attained by developing a relationship to the Supreme. And therefore, it's just like if you live in a home and you love your children, and you think of their needs, and you're thinking what you can find them for breakfast, or what you can find some activity to do, then you're constantly engaged in doing things. You're standing in the kitchen and cooking. Also, a devotee of Krishna is often standing in the kitchen cooking something and thinking, this will be nice for Krishna. I can put it on a plate. I can create a menu where the tastes will harmonize and lift each other, because then Krishna will have a very enjoyable meal, and that's what I want to do. So that is the practical method. Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, is a little more difficult, because then it starts with controlling the intelligence, controlling the mind. But once the yogi reaches this stage, then it's also a sustainable platform where the yogi experiences the bliss of the soul, especially if he comes to the stage of actually connecting. That's what we heard earlier. When the mind is controlled, the super soul is already reached, because super soul is there. We are there in the heart, but we don't see him, because we're so busy with all the noise all around us. So once we can be quiet, once our mind calms down and focuses on Krishna, then that will be the highest level of happiness and satisfaction in every way. It's still a tough process, and Krishna consciousness is still a little bit easier and a little bit more natural for the embodied soul, but it's the same idea. I'm reading one more text, 26. Yato yato nischalati manas chanchala asthiram tatas tato niyamyetad atmanyeva vashangnayet. There's also one of those verses, if you study Bhagavad-gita by learning some of the verses by heart, then this is one of those core verses. From wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. Purport. The nature of the mind is flickering and unsteady, but a self-realized yogi has to control the mind should not control him. One who controls the mind, and therefore the senses as well, is called Goswami or Swami, and one who is controlled by the mind is called Godasa, or the servant of the senses. A Goswami knows the standard of sense happiness. In transcendental sense happiness, the senses are engaged in the service of Rishikesh, or the supreme owner of the senses, Krishna. Serving Krishna with purified senses is called Krishna consciousness. That is the way of bringing the senses under full control. What is more, that is the highest perfection of yoga practice. So this is a very practical instruction. If your mind wanders, you bring it back. And if it wanders again, you keep bringing it back. That's our meditation is of course not the same type of entering a cave and meditating for hundreds of years, but we are meditating on the names of Krishna in the form of the Mahamantra, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we do that on our beads, which has 108 beads, and then we turn around at least 16 times a day. And the whole idea is that we hear that mantra. That's what Prabhupada described as the perfection, is so sincerely chant and trying to hear. So we do that, and then the mind goes away, and then we bring it back, and then the mind goes away, and then we bring it back. And it's a little repetitive sometimes, and it's not very, it's not a very highly philosophical concept, but it's an important concept, because the mind is like that. It just flutters all over the place. But we're not that mind, and we have something more important to do. We want to hear that Hare Krishna mantra. We want to remember Krishna, serve him in so many ways. So that's what we do. We know what we want to do, and then sometimes the mind just does something else anyway, so we bring it back. I will read one more. 27. Prashanta manasam yenang yoginang sukhamuttamam uppaiti shantaradya sang brahmabhutam akalmasham. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He's beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme, and thus he is freed from all reactions to past deeds. Yes, and verily is just a fancy way of saying certainly. So this is very sure. It is like that. If you can fix your mind on Krishna, that is the perfection. It's not necessarily very easy, but it is. It's not unnatural, because naturally, when there is love, then the object of your love, your mind will naturally go there all the time. Anything that happens, it will remind you of that person that you love. So, before we have that love in the heart, it is a little bit of a struggle. But even very, very early on in the process, even if we don't have that pure, all-compassing sense of love for Krishna, there is an attraction. We really like Krishna. We really like to hear about him, sing about him. So whenever we do that, then this constant grating voice of the mind in the head, it stops, because the mind is also happy and satisfied to hear about Krishna. So that's also one of the verses we have in this Bhagavad-gita. The uncontrolled mind is like your enemy, but the controlled mind is like your greatest friend, because the controlled mind also wants to hear about Krishna and serve Krishna and think of different ways, thinking, feeling and willing. Those are the propensities of the mind, creating newer and newer service opportunities. It's just that we know that, we learn that, we read it in Bhagavad-gita, so that we don't give up before we come to a point where we can actually taste some of that sweet spiritual success of achieving Krishna consciousness. Purport. Brahmabhuta is the state of being freed from material contamination and situated in the transcendental service of the Lord. Mad bhakting labate parang, Bhagavad-gita 1854. One cannot remain in the quality of Brahman, the Absolute, until one's mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord. Savai mana Krishna padaravindayo. To be always engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, or to remain in Krishna consciousness, is to be factually liberated from the mode of passion and all material contamination. So Krishna consciousness, it's not just a theory. It's not just like, because you can do that. You can build a philosophy that is perfect. You can create a structure with thoughts and words that looks like a utopia. But if you don't have a bridge to go there, it is pretty much useless. So Krishna consciousness is practical. Yes, it does point out the spiritual world. It does point out that situation in the Lord's spiritual planet, where we have an invitation to come and be part of that life of love and service. But it doesn't negate the reality of us being in this material world for a very long time, in a world conditioned by the three modes of nature, in a body with mind and senses, and so on. Krishna knows about those things, and he's giving us instructions on how to deal with it in a practical way, both accepting the reality of our present situation and accepting the reality of our ultimate spiritual situation, and showing that yes, there is a bridge, there is a reality, there's a practical way how we can get there, because we actually already belong there. I will read text 28 also. Sunjane vang sadatmanang yogi vigata kalmasaha sukhena brahma sangsparsham atyantang sukhamashnute. Thus the self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the Lord. Purport. Self-realization means knowing one's constitutional position in relationship to the Supreme. The individual soul is part and parcel of the Supreme, and his position is to render transcendental service to the Lord. This transcendental contact with the Supreme is called Brahma Sangsparsha. So, from knowledge, we can learn that our constitutional position is in relationship to the Supreme. But by practicing the yoga process, and especially the bhakti yoga process, one can realize it. One can wake up once, because we are spirit soul, we are Satchitananda, we are eternal, we are full of knowledge, or to speak of bliss. But we have forgotten these things because we wanted to forget those things. So that knowledge is within us, but that it takes a process to awaken it again. And the beginning of that process is to actually learn it. I can say that from just reading the Bhagavad-gita. I am an eternal spirit soul, an eternal servant in loving service to Krishna. But I may not have the full realization. I certainly don't have the full realization. And then gradually, by this process, we will wake up one day back in Vrindavan, back in our service, in that relationship where we belong. And Krishna will say, what took you so long? But until then, it's not a binary process. It's not that either we are there or we are not there. We make progress. We make a spiritual advancement. We go step by step closer to Krishna. And that is the whole point of yoga. And this chapter is describing, of course, jnana yoga. Same principle applies to bhakti yoga. Only it is a little more practical to apply in our lives. Hare Krishna. We have some links down in the box. I put them there. In case you would like to order Bhagavad-gita, you can do so. And if you want to find a Hare Krishna temple to visit, there are some addresses also. And I would very much appreciate if you have some questions, if you write them in the comment field, because then I can come back and answer them as best as I can. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for watching. We aim for updates every Tuesday and Friday. Please come back. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down there. We also have some links and information for you. And there is, of course, the subscribe button. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
I'm a Hare Krishna. and I approve this message. Subscribe.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.